And hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. After months of anticipation, after months of waiting, the New York Jets 2025 draft has seemingly come to a close, barring any trades. Now, again, if we do get any more trades, we will talk to you. And day 3 was definitely a very interesting one. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And also, check out our community page right now where we have an active poll where I put up what grade would you give the New York Jets for their entire 2025 draft class. And again, guys, the super chat feature, so you can jump to the front of the line, or if you want to make a donation to the channel, is available as well. So let's get into the New York Jets 2025 draft. If you were to poll fans right now, I think if you were to ask them, what would you view day 1 and day 2? I think most Jet fans would say they were very happy with the first 3 rounds of this draft. If you were to ask them their thoughts on day 3, I think you are going to get a very mixed bag. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to recap all the picks that the Jets made on day 3, go over their potential role on this team, why they were drafted. We'll go over the picks. Then we'll go over what this tells us about what this regime is looking for. And finally, what this means for the roster, and more importantly, previewing the undrafted free agency class that we will talk about. And again, I will be doing a video tomorrow to give you an update on the undrafted. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that episode tomorrow. So the Jets started off the draft with a very interesting pick. Now, this is someone that I have talked about a lot on this channel. I've had Aren Smith going to the Jets for a while, and most of my mock drafts, I had him going in about the 5th round range because I had a 5th round grade on him. The Jets selected him in the 4th round with pick 110. Now, this, I think, really kind of set the tone for the fan base today and the thoughts on this draft. Because I saw this comment a lot, and I think it's a comment we're going to hear a lot of in the coming days, which is they reached on a player. They drafted him before he was supposed to go off the board. They reached on a player. But here's the thing, especially on day 3, you're looking at prospects where they're in this range for a reason. You're drafting for traits. And when you look at Aren Smith, here's the things about him that I like and the things that I do have a concern about. He is a blazer. When the ball's in his hands, you see why he has 4.35 speed. You see why he is a dynamic player. You see he can take the top off the defense. And really, this is a guy that the Jets don't have in that room that can really stretch the field. I don't think he'll be a guy that comes in right away and be a number 2 receiver, which I think a lot of Jet fans were hoping for out of this draft class. But I do think he is someone that can really work exceptionally well, stretching the field, being a dynamic playmaker, and could develop. Now, the big faux pas on him, as we know, is the drops. We understand that the drops are a major issue for him. And while I do get that it is concerning, especially the double-digit drops, the things that the Jets were saying about him and why I think the Jets are going to look past that a bit is because he is an incredibly hard worker. You saw John Gruden talk about how much he likes this kid and his work ethic. I think the Jets feel that this is a very coachable player, that this is someone that they can develop, that this is someone that if they develop him right can be a very useful weapon for this team. And while I know it's a very rough product right now, this is someone that if they do it correctly could be an incredibly dynamic player. The other big thing, which I think gets overlooked, and this is incredibly important on day 3, what other roles do you play for the team? Because when you are drafting guys on today, you are looking for guys that are going to fill out multiple roles on the team. Now, I understand that the first position, obviously, for him is going to be wide receiver. But you also look at with his speed, could he be potential punt returner, a dynamic punt returner that the Jets didn't really have last year? Could that be pushed for a punt return? But more importantly, this is someone that could be a gunner on special teams. And the Jets have had issues with the gunner position. And it makes you wonder, could that be one of the reasons the Jets took him here? Keep in mind, part of the game of the draft is having an understanding of who could be interesting. And I think there was enough buzz around Smith that the Jets felt that they couldn't wait until round 5 to draft him. And I understand that there's going to be a lot of fans that don't like this pick. And the big thing, I understand that there's frustration that people are going to look at their boards, have their prospects. And look, I'll be frank, I had a 5th round grade on him. Do you love drafting players a little bit early? No, but I look at it more on day 3. I give it a little bit more of a pass because you're looking for fits. You're looking for guys that you think can be coachable. Where day 1 or 2, if you're drafting a guy in the 1st round that I have a 3rd round grade on, that's a big concern. But really, if it's like a round differential grade here, I don't really mind it too much because, again, their boards are different than our boards. They have different valuations. But I do see a theme that's being developed with the players that the Jets have drafted, and I will get to that in a minute. So the Jets, surprisingly, made 2 trades. They came up twice today. The first one was in the 4th round. They came up for Malachi Moore, the safety from Alabama. This is a really good pick, and I do really like it. And this, I feel like the consensus among Jet fans was probably their favorite pick of the day. And when you look at him, he's a 4-year starter at Alabama, starting as a freshman in an Alabama defense, especially with Nick Saban there, is someone that's something really impressive to me. He can move all over the field, can play in the nickel position, can play the defense, can play the back end. You look like you don't really want him in the man-to-man scheme. I don't think he has the speed for that, but he's a very willing run defender, which is something that the Jets, and I don't think in this back room they really have, is having that willing run defender, a guy that can come up and blitz in special packages. He can get up the field. He doesn't have like the difference-making size and athleticism, but look, he's a tough, instinctive player. He can play the run. He has range and coverage. He seems to me like he can become this team's starting strong safety, potentially even at the end of this year. And he is going to be a solid player, I think, in the NFL. I think he's a very smart player, a very heady player, and the kind of guy you want at the back end that could be a leader of your defense. A little bit older at 23 years old, but this was a pick I really liked. And it also makes me look at it, too, because now they have Seen now on the 1-year contract. I know yesterday we talked about Stevens moving to the safety position, but it makes me wonder if the Jets are maybe going to try to move some of the corner depth in this room and what they evaluate the position. Because one guy we haven't really talked about is Tony Adams. Again, I know Adams is young, but maybe this regime's looking at the tape. They don't like what they see. Maybe he's someone they move off of. Quantez Stiggers was a guy I was mentioning the other day. Could he be potentially a safety? I'm very curious to see what the Jets are going to do. Now, they could still trade. Maybe they do a player swap with one of those players to get other positions. But it's clear that the Jets, even though we feel like the back end of this defense was a strength, still felt that they had to upgrade. So this was probably my favorite pick of the day, and I think consensus was for Jet fans, this was probably the favorite. So the Jets ended the day with 2 fifth-round picks. 162 is what they had. They traded back up to 176, basically pick swapping this year and next year with Baltimore. But let's get to the first one. So this probably was a pick that really, I think, divided a lot of the fan base. And at first glance, I will be honest, I was a little surprised with this move. But the more I thought about it and the more I looked into it, the more it made sense. Now, I understand that there is a big thing in this draft that when you walk away as a Jet fan, you're frustrated by, and I will get to that at the end of going over all the players. Again, Super Chats jumped to the front of the line. But when I looked at the pick for Francisco Mayago, I was a little surprised. Again, this is the pick they got for Mike Williams, the linebacker from Miami. My initial thought was I was surprised they went linebacker, especially after Sherwood. But when you watch the tape and when you look at his skill set, he brings something to the room that the Jets don't really have. The Jets last year, part of the reason that the run defense was terrible, it wasn't just because of the front four. It was also because they had small linebackers. When you could get onto the second level, it was easy to get to Sherwood and Quincy, and being small backs. If you could get a guard on them, it was very difficult for them to get off those guards. They bring in a guy that's 233 pounds, basically around the same size that C.J. Mosley was. A big-bodied linebacker, a front, like early first round, second round early first or second down player. But what I love about him is he gets up the field. He's got good playing speed. He's a good tackler. And you wonder if this is a long-term pick where you look at the Jets, investing in a linebacker that's better against the run than what they have in the room. And number two, could this mean that they're looking at Quincy Williams' replacement? Are they kind of hinting that they're going to eventually move on from Quincy at the end of this next contract? Now, I understand people were looking at the board, seeing a lot of 6-round grades on him, looking at it and go, I can't believe that the Jets drafted this guy early. The thing is, especially on day 3, if you feel that there's a team that could take a guy, you are also trying to play the field a little bit. Maybe there's a receiver or two out there that the Jets feel are very confident is going to get to the undrafted waiver, and they'll be one of the front teams. Because right now what the Jets are probably doing, not probably, what they're actually doing is working the phones and setting themselves up for the undrafted period. But when I look at Mayoga, he had 29 tackles for a loss and 26 starts. He's a very sharp player, a captain. He has good reactions. And you look at he had some mistakes, but the thing he has is a lot of instincts. He has good chase speed. He's got a great mentality. And this is a guy also, when we talk about special teams, I think he's going to be a big special teamer for this team. And finally, the Jets traded back up. And again, they didn't have to go too far for their final pick. They went with Tyler Barron, the edge from Miami, in a trade. So again, the Jets staying in the Southeast to wrap it up. So Barron, to me, is a nice player. And he fits a need that this team desperately needed. I talked a lot about Elijah Roberts, who, of course, got drafted by the Patriots. But I was looking at Roberts and saying the Jets need that in-betweener guy, a guy that early in the downs can play the edge, but then can kick inside and be a flexible guy on the front that you can move along the defensive line and scheme him in different places. And Barron, to me, is that role player that the Jets were looking for. I mean, you look at the sack production, wasn't bad last year. He's a power athlete. He wins with power. He reminds me kind of similar to JFM. He's not going to beat you with speed. He's not going to beat you with agility. He's just going to beat you with effort, and he's going to beat you with a bull rush. I mean, he's a physical guy. This guy has a motor that does not stop, and he's a bigger defensive end. You look at his size, 6'5", 260, can play the edge in early downs. I'm curious to see how they're going to line up Will McDonald in this new scheme, but this is a guy that on those early downs, we know in Wilk's system, he loves that NASCAR package, which is putting those bigger bodies or maybe smaller defensive ends on the inside to create mismatches. Is this a guy that, like JFM, starts on early downs on the outside when it's running down? On third down, do you kick him inside next to Quinnen? I mean, he is a good potential piece. He's got a good fastball. I think he's a good sub-package player. And when I look at him, this is someone that I don't think had the best season last year, but there's a lot of traits here. And when at the end of the day, when I look at the Jets, the big thing I said before we got into this draft period was this. We are going to learn what this organization values, what this regime values. And it's clear they want guys that are team leaders. They want guys that have very good production. For the most part, they want guys that are very instinctual, but it seems like they also want guys that are very coachable, guys that are willing to learn, guys that you can build up a bit. And it seems like that's what the Jets wanted. So before I get to your comments, and again, we'll do the undrafted show tomorrow, so make sure to like and subscribe. I do think that there are some issues with this draft. And again, no draft is ever perfect. But I get the sense from what Jet fans wanted in this draft, you can get why they're frustrated. If you wanted a quarterback like Kyle McCord and you were hoping for his name to be called and the Jets didn't get him, I think you were disappointed with day 3. If you were someone that wanted them to get an additional tight end or another wide receiver, or in your opinion, a more productive wide receiver, you come away feeling a bit disappointed. When you look at this defensive line, especially, I think that if the biggest criticism to me is when you have an incredible interior defensive tackle class and the Jets didn't draft one, that to me raises an eyebrow. But I've thought about this, and two things have come to the forefront for me on that Number one, are they higher on the guys they brought in, or they're higher on Leonard Taylor? Because Leonard Taylor, don't forget, the Jets got him as an undrafted player last year. I had a high grade on him. I thought he showed good flashes last year. Maybe they were looking at the tape and saying, look, we like his upside. Let's give him a shot this year and see what he can bring to the table. And the other thing, too, is are the Jets banking on, and again, this is part of the strategy, is there a defensive tackle that they view as an undrafted player or someone that's going to fall to the undrafted ranks that they can pick up, kind of what they did last year with Taylor? Like, do you think it's such a talented group that one of those talented players is going to fall through the cracks, be there in the undrafted period, and eventually could be picked up? But again, before I get to your comments, I want to view our grade. I asked you in the community page, and if you haven't already, check out the community page for your grade on the draft. Last time I checked, it was mostly Bs. Let's see if that's been updated. Just refreshing right now, 75% B, 25% A. No C's, surprisingly, though. I thought we might get a couple of C's in there as well. But I mean, look, if you were someone that was, and I get the frustration, if you were really hoping and penciled in D tackles today and you come out of it today and you go, well, I'm disappointed in the defensive tackles. Now, again, Muji and Glenn are in the press conference, so it does seem to be over. We'll get to some of their comments on some of their draft picks today. I mean, some interesting players I could see maybe the Jets looking at in the undrafted period. I mean, one player I have to check. I don't think he's been drafted yet. Nazir Stackhouse is someone I brought up. Maybe he goes into the undrafted period, although he's a Georgia kid, so the Eagles will probably snoop him at some point. But let's get to some of your comments. Then we'll get to some of the comments from the Jets press conference, and then what I think the Jets will be looking to do in the undrafted period. So, Kev, picks that required thinking are horrible. I'm guessing you're referring to day 3, just would like a little bit clarification. I give the Jets an A grade the first 2 rounds, but the rest a big F. And James, like, I can understand. I'm curious. Let me know in your comments what you thought the Jets needed to target, or who were a couple players you would have liked. The Jets, yeah, this was frustrating. I don't think they were necessarily forced into picking bad players. I do think round 4, Deion Walker could have maybe been someone the Jets had on their radar, but they didn't really bring him in for a visit, so I'm not sure. I mean, I'm looking at around the time Smith was on the board. I'm going to go check out round 5 again, but I'm just looking at some of the players on the board there. I mean, Gunnar Helm could have been a possibility in the 4th round. He went 120 to the Titans. Just looking at a couple of the edges out there too, just seeing if there's anyone. Kyle Kennard was someone the Jets were linked to. He went 125 in that round as well. Not a lot of receivers, although Jalen Lane did go from Virginia Tech. Jets, of course, trade up to 130 to get Malachi Moore, which I thought was a good move. And then in round 5, I'll see. I'm trying to think, who did the Bills jumped at 72 last night, but I still think the Jets probably got the player they wanted at 73. I do think round 3 is a good long-term play. I get a guy that I thought had good value and that fits the scheme incredibly well. Just checking to see who the other Bill pick was today. So I'm just making sure I have all my ducks in a row here. So, yeah, no, the Eagles went up and got the linebacker from Georgia. I'm just looking at the board. I mean, I'm a little surprised Gadsden wasn't selected by the Jets. He went 3 picks after Francisco did. Torrey Horn, the wide receiver from Colorado State, I know he was someone that especially a lot of people on the channel were pushing for last night. And then the Jets with the final pick got Tyler Barron. So, I mean, I get the frustration from Jet fans, because I think in our head we have this idea that they're going to draft a receiver, a tight end, like some combination. But look, it's clear they felt that they needed to upgrade the defense. They wanted to balance it out, and that's what they did. I don't know if he was on their board, though. That's the curious thing, because when I looked at the pre-draft process, he really wasn't on their board a lot. I mean, that to me is a little bit frustrating. But again, that's the NFL draft. Teams are going to do that. I mean, that's all part of the game. Let's see. We took a wide receiver, but he has a lot of drops. He had 10 drops last year, James. Again, I think they're hoping to get a lot out of him. Bills and Pats got really good. Aaron Glenn got taken to school, and all the QBs are gone. Look, I get the frustration. I understand people are looking. I think the Patriots did have a good draft as well. I mean, look, here's the thing. I mean, this is year one of a rebuild for this franchise. I think that there were times the board didn't fall their way. Again, the Bills jumped them twice, which I think like you were saying, potential players off the board. I mean, there's certain players that, I mean, once we get into day 3, I didn't think there was a player outside of maybe Elijah Roberts from SMU that I really thought was a slam dunk for the Jets today. I mean, even Smith. I mean, Smith is a funny one because Smith, I had a 5th round grade. If we took him in the 5th round, would people feel a little bit better about it? But let's get to some of the comments. Again, Super Chat jumped to the front of the line. Let's see. Darren Muji on Aren Smith. We had an explosive speed element. He's an offensive weapon. Aaron Glenn said he talked to Brian Branch about Malachi Moore before the draft. They were teammates at Alabama, said Branch gave him a rave review. So it seems like the Jets, again, it's one of those things, too, where you see a lot of Jets fans giving a lot of C's out there, a lot of bad grades. But look, I don't think the Jets had a bad draft. I do see, and Aaron Glenn had a comparison, Aaron Smith dealing with drop issues is to what he witnessed with Jameson Williams on the Lions, thinks he can improve that like Williams did. And look, I do get that some of the pieces are a little frustrating for some of the Jet fans because, again, this today wasn't a sexy draft for the Jets. This wasn't a draft where if the Jets had added another receiver, another pass catcher, I think a lot more people would have a different opinion. If they had a quarterback, there'd be more intrigue. But they added a linebacker, which they needed. They added a pass rusher and a defensive rotational lineman, which was what they needed. They added a safety, which is a position that, again, for the last couple of years, the Jets have really struggled with. I'm trying to remember if they even drafted under Robert Saleh safety. I know Adams was undrafted, but I mean, look, it's just, I get that there's a lot of people that are frustrating with the Jets, but here's the biggest thing with the draft. And I know there's still a lot of raw emotion today. Again, I don't think the Jets they drafted in the third. I don't think on day 3 they drafted people that didn't deserve to be drafted day 3. These were all players that had day 3 grades. These were players that, yes, maybe some of them are close to the 6th or 7th round picks, but the Jets picked them at the back end of the 5th round. So it's not like there's this ginormous gap from where they were expected to go and where they went. And I think the Jets are telling you, and they're telling this fan base what they think of certain positions. They feel that Tony Adams and the safeties that they had weren't good enough and they needed to improve it. They felt they still need to get better at the corner position. They felt that the defensive tackle position, which again, I still think is an issue, but they brought in 3 guys that they're hoping will be good. And they also feel like Leonard Taylor can maybe take that next step next year. The biggest thing I look for with this team right now is these are the players they picked. And it doesn't matter what we think of the draft. If these players hit and are making an impact on the team next year, then we will look at this differently. It all comes down to coaching. And the thing I look at with a lot of these kids is one of the biggest traits that jumped out to me is these are all very instinctual kids. These are all kids that have a very high football IQ. These are kids that have really hard motors, and these are kids that are going to be grinders. Again, Aaron Glenn, I think, is looking at these kids, and maybe the rest of the NFL views them as like a C plus B minus player, but he feels in this scheme and with their work ethic, they can be very good and productive players. If the Jets get on this day 3, again, they're not all hits, but if the Jets today, let's just use an example. if the Jets found a linebacker that's going to be a big piece of this defense for the next 5 to 7 years, not a Pro Bowler, but someone that's a big impact player on first and second down, as a good run stuffer, that was a good pick. If they found someone that becomes their starting strong safety in the 4th round, which is certainly possible, that is a good pick. Even Smith. If Smith doesn't have to become a team's number 1 receiver, heck, he might not even have to become a number 2. But if he's a dynamic return man, if he's someone that can make an impact in the game, if he can make an impact play in a game on the offensive side or as a gunner on special teams, he is definitely someone that could be a good pick. And look, I get that a lot of people come out of this draft going, meh, it wasn't what I was expecting. I think, again, a lot of us were hoping for more offensive players on day 3, but don't forget the Jets invested their first 2 picks on the offensive side. I'm curious to see how the Jets address the skill position. Do they look to a veteran target? Do they look to try to trade for a veteran? Do they look to potentially, after the draft, look for some cuts? Because, again, some of these teams might have gotten players they weren't expecting. There's a lot of different options here. And the big thing is some of the positions like defensive tackle. The Jets found Al Jefferson basically on the scrap heap. You can find a run-stuffing defensive tackle a lot easier than you can find certain other positions. And I love James basically asking a good question. Overall, it was good, but not great. I don't get the wide receiver pick, though. Look, this is someone that they did a lot of work on with Smith. And the other thing, too, Kevin, is I would also look at this. The Jets, I talked about this last night. I think the Jets' strategy coming into today was they were going to take a receiver, but I think that they're also looking for receivers to fall into the undrafted pool that they can take, that they can potentially develop, that they can potentially look to be guys that can be out there. I'm trying to see too, again, I'm trying to keep up with the board here. I'm trying to see, like, I know Nick Nash was a player I mentioned. I don't know if he's gone drafted yet. But when I looked at the players the Jets worked out, they worked out a lot of guys that are probably going to be there. Nick Nash could potentially be a priority free agent. Will Shepard, Carl Smith, Landon Parker. And when you look at Smith is a guy they really liked. I mean, they had a 30 visit with him. They worked him out a lot. This is someone that they looked at and they view at him as, look, he needs to be developed, but you can't develop that 4.36 speed. This is a raw player, but we feel they can develop. And look, if the coaches develop him, we're talking about a different story. This could be a different player. This could be a different viewpoint in a year or two. Like, we can go back at this and maybe go, well, maybe they did make a good pick because they picked an impactful player. So it's a roll of the dice. And sometimes on day 3, you go with the upside, you go with the traits, and you go with the guys that have a fastball that not a lot of guys on day 3 have. And look at this, Smith is one of, if not the fastest guy at the wide receiver room on day 3, and the Jets are going to roll the dice on him. I know as a fan base, it's frustrating, but the other thing too is they didn't address in the first round. And for a pass catcher, they addressed the tight end position as a pass catcher. I don't think they're going to be throwing the ball 45, 50 times a game with this receiving room anyways. So, but I think that's the Jets' strategy, is try to get an undrafted free agent in terms of a wide receiver. The defensive tackle, again, I get the disappointment. There was a lot of people that wanted to D-tackle. Look, I'll raise my hand. I'm one of them. And I understand that if you wanted a defensive tackle and you want that beef, you come away a little bit disappointed. But maybe it's because this team has a higher viewpoint on Leonard Taylor than we do. Maybe they look at this room and go, okay, we didn't address the edge position as much because we're going to be blitzing a lot more. We're going to be looking for a veteran edge at some point. But again, this comes down to Tony Alexia. The stuff comes down to over drafting players on players not worth the pick. Look, it's the term over drafting. I get it. The thing is, especially on day 3, if it's in the first 3 rounds, I think it's more prevalent because when we go through like the first 100 players, it's one thing. But when we get into this part of the draft, people are like, oh, they overdrafted. If they are a day 3 player, I almost feel like we shouldn't even put, are they a day 1 or 2 player? Are they a first, second round, third round player? And then I think it's, are they undraftable or a priority free agent, or are they a day 3 player? Because there's such a wide range on day 3. And again, it comes down to who they feel they can develop and who is at the top of their board. And I get it. Royals was definitely a popular player. I understand that a lot of people looked at it and went, well, the draft guide says he should be drafted here as opposed to, Aren Smith. But look, this is the thing too. If I were to have a crystal ball and tell you the Jets drafted Aren Smith in the 5th round as opposed to the top of the 4th, would you feel a lot better? The thing too is you have to wonder, the Jets also, part of being an organization is you're supposed to be looking out at other teams. Maybe they heard rumblings or they knew there's a team that was going to take him so he wouldn't be available in the 5th round. I mean, at this point on day 3, it's about getting the guys you want in your building. It's about making sure that you don't chance them to get to the undrafted pool. And it's to make sure that if you feel another team could draft him, because again, this is a guy with 4.35, 4.36 speed. Some team, maybe it's Kansas City, there was going to be a team that would have taken a shot on him today. And I get the production. I understand the frustration, especially because he goes to Kansas City. You feel he's going to be very productive there. But the thing with that, though, is you wonder about the medicals. I mean, this is someone that had a major right foot injury in the second half of the season. And you wonder how much that played into the Jets' decision not to draft him. Again, the Jets make these decisions. And I know as this fan base, it's very uncomfortable with this Jets history. And I understand the frustration. I understand how people look at the draft and, pause and say, I don't believe until I see it. And look, that's a good attitude. But now it's on this coaching staff to make sure that they go out there and develop these kids. Let's see. Tony Alexio, Giants killed the draft, unlike the Jets who struck out. Terrible draft. I like the Giants picks. I think Jackson Dart, again, I think that was more out of desperation. But I did like that they got Alexander, the kid from Toledo. If he was there in the 3rd round, I think the Jets would have taken him. I thought they did a good job with the running back. I mean, look, how many years, though, do we look at teams that we think have horrible drafts and then we come out the other side of it and it's like, oh, they actually didn't really have a good draft. And Kevin, my complaint isn't where they drafted him. I wouldn't have drafted a dude known more for drops than catches. Look, Kevin, I get it. And it's up to this coaching staff. When you make your bed with these picks, you have to line them. If the Jets, it doesn't work out wide receiver, that's on this organization. And look, there's a reason why you get judged on your draft picks. That's why Joe Douglas is no longer his GM, because he had one great draft class in 2022 and a lot of misses. And the thing with this is, if I could say one thing about this Jets draft class, it is that they had a plan and they clearly had players that they like because they went up and traded for 2 of them. And they probably were having intel that those players were going to be taken. But the thing is, the Jets wanted to get football players. They wanted to build an identity. And I think they're doing that. They got tough, instinctual, hard-nosed football players to this team. I think Smith is a bit of the outlier, but I feel like the other ones, and even Smith, I think, is a hard worker. But you got guys that are going to come in and have a plan. To me, the Jets had a plan. There are some teams in this draft, on paper, the Browns draft looks great. But then this is a Browns team that also drafted a kid in the 3rd round at quarterback who we thought should never have even gotten that close to being a quarterback drafted there. They pass on Shadur only to trade back into the 5th round for Shadur. And now they have 5 quarterbacks on their roster, not knowing what to do with them. I can say this. The Jets had a plan. the Jets had a plan coming into this draft, and I think that they followed it. And look, it comes down to, did they get the right players? And we're not going to know until at least somewhat through the season. We are not going to know. And my big thing too is for everyone that's killing the Barron pick. Look, the Barron pick basically means the end of Michael Clemens. So let's celebrate that, if anything. We'll get to some more of your questions. Again, Super Chats, jump to the front of the line. Do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button because we will be back to go over the undrafted period tomorrow. Also, check out the community page. I asked you to grade in the community page the New York Jets draft. 22% of you said A, B, 78%. So it's funny, like I'm getting in the chat that the Jets an awful draft, but the grades don't really reflect it. So let's get to some of the comments here from Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji, who are in the press conference right now. And look, part of the thing too with the Jets too, the way the board fell, again, it's unfortunate the Bills jumped them a couple times. I don't think the board fell to the Jets a couple times, although they did get Mason Taylor. I was worried he'd be off the board at 42. So again, I think he did a good job. Aaron Glenn on the Jets draft hall. We got guys that fit the brand of what we're going to be. We're very intentional about guys. We want to be part of this organization. Aaron Glenn compared Aren Smith dealing with drop issues to what he witnessed with Jameson Williams on the Lions. Thinks he can improve that like Williams did. Look, I think the big things is they want guys that are tough-nosed and that fit the bill. And look, if anything, when we look back at kind of the Lions draft for the last couple of years, I think the Lions drafts, we kind of looked at as like maybe they were a little bit boring. Maybe they felt like a little underwhelming, but they got dudes that fit that program. They got guys that were hard-nosed. They got guys that fit the identity of that team. And if we come out of this and the Jets, like I said, if they found a good rotational piece as a pass rusher, they did a good job. I think the biggest outlier is Aren Smith. Like, let's do this for a second because I know he's been a big talking point, especially with other receivers that were on the board, as Riley Leonard just went off the board as well. I am curious, too, one quarterback that I've really mentioned a lot during this this draft process, who I'm curious to see who could be here, is Cam Miller. Does Cam Miller from North Dakota State get to the undrafted period? If he does, I think he's someone to keep an eye on for the Jets. But let's take out, and again, I know it's difficult, but let's take out the receiver. If you look at safety, linebacker, edge, what do you think about this draft class? Because I think it's a polarizing pick there where they took Aren Smith. And look, Aren Smith's got a lot of great tools. I get that. But I also understand, too, that when you look at Aaron Glenn saying Jameson Williams, well, Jameson Williams also had 1,600 yards at Alabama. I also understand that, too. So I think that when you look at guys like Malachi Moore, he can play safety, he can play nickel. I think you've got guys that are versatile on the defensive line. I don't think this was a bad draft. I feel like a lot of people are feeling underwhelmed, and a lot of it, I think, comes down to the defensive tackle. I really do wonder if the Jets had drafted a different wide receiver and took a defensive tackle with one of these picks. Thanks, Tony. Give Rich a like, not this draft. That's a good one. I appreciate it. Good comment there. Glenn is enough. I wouldn't say they struck out. I still think they got decent players. I do think that they got decent players in this draft, and they fit needs. I actually love the Barron pick. Great JFM replacement. Like, I think that's the role he's going to play. Look, I hate grading. I hate doing the grades. Like, I think that's – I would say – A for day one. I think last night I would probably have given an A-, and then today probably a C+. But again, it's day 3 of the draft. These are a lot of different players. As they're talking about Jason Taylor and Mason Taylor right now on TV, which is funny that the Jets come up. Look, SpinMax brings up a great point. JD drafts are very entertaining. These guys are meh. Well, maybe the Jets mean more meh because under Joe Douglas, the Jets won 30% of their games. Under Joe Douglas, they lost nearly they didn't get over 7 wins a season. I mean, the thing with the Jets too is everyone wants the flash. Everyone wants like the glitz and the glam, and I understand that, but maybe this is what the Jets needed is a boring draft to get key players in that are just good football players. Like maybe that's what they needed. And when you look at the needs, certain needs, again, defensive tackle, I think is the big glaring one where people are looking at and going, what the heck? But I think the Jets are going to, again, this comes down to what they view as Leonard. Maybe they view Leonard Taylor as a potential starting defensive tackle, and that's why they felt they didn't need to go out there and get a defensive tackle. Maybe they feel he will fit better in that scheme than he even did in last year's scheme. Maybe they have their eyes on a guy in free agency that they didn't bring in yet, but they still could bring in. What if this team tomorrow goes and signs Keenan Allen to be the number 2 receiver? Do you feel a lot better about Aren Smith? Like there's still an off season. There's still cut downs. There's still June 1st cuts. There's still training camp cuts. Like there's still a long way to go in this whole process. And this is a process that we look back on the drafts. Like, look, I'll be honest, when the Jets in the 2020 draft, many of us thought they had a great draft because we thought they got their left tackle. We thought they got a dynamic receiver. We thought they got a potential starting safety. It was one of the worst draft classes the Jets ever had. One of the worst. So my big thing too is, again, I think there are certain players when I look at the way the board fell that hurt the Jets. So if we go back into round 4 today, like we'll go back to round 3 because I know the Bills trade up in round 3 was definitely something intriguing. So the Bills traded up to take Landon Jackson. Again, I don't think he necessarily was in play for the Jets, but I think the Jets, but if they got a starting potential corner on day in round 3, I still think that was a decent pick. Round 4, let's just see how round 4, again, there's so many picks that go on. Again, there was a run on the running backs to start the day. Dante Thornton Jr. went at 108. I mean, and I get some of the frustration with the receivers, but I mean, look, I don't think the Jets are going to have a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. I think they're going to value the tight ends more than anything. They still got a pass catcher in the tight end room. And look, Malachi Moore, again, we look at the safety position. We've been clamoring for the Jets to invest in the safety position. They've invested in the safety position in free agency. Now they've done it in the draft. I think the back end of the defense is really going to be good. But I just, like, again, I don't think they got bad players. I think the best player that kind of summarizes this draft is probably Francisco from Miami at 162. Because on the surface, he was a pick that seemed like the Jets really didn't need, because on the surface, the Jets just paid Jamie Sherwood. They paid him a lot of money. They don't need to really upgrade the defensive linebacking room. However, when you look at the needs of this team, and I know D-tackle was a big one of the things that hurt this team last year a lot was that you look at what happened when basically CJ Mosley got hurt. The aspect of this defense changed, and we all looked at it and said, well, it's the leadership. That probably was part of it. But when I look at this team, I look at a linebacking room that is very small. Could get, if a guy, an offensive line gets to the second level, I think that is very difficult to get off. They needed a bigger body in the middle of this defense. They needed someone, and don't forget, this is a new scheme too. This is going to be a new defense. They're going to want these linebackers to blitz. What'd they get? They got a big physical linebacker that can come up the middle and blitz, that can play the run defense. And here's the other thing. When you're building a roster, you're not just building it for the 2025 season. You're trying to build it out in the next 3 years. What's going to happen next year? There's a good chance Quincy Williams probably isn't on this team for the long term. So the Jets now have put themselves in a position where if they hit on this linebacker, all of a sudden next year, when they come back around and go into free agency and go into the draft, they're not desperate to get a linebacker, and they can upgrade other parts of this roster. Like you look at the corner position. When they pay Sauce Gardner, they're not going to be able to pay other corners. So they got a young corner that they're going to be playing, hopefully, third-round money for 4 years, which is a good idea. And how you is I don't know about that. I do not I don't agree with that. I mean, I'd be curious what JD would have done in this draft. I really would have been. I really would be surprised. But look, to me, Smith is probably the biggest head scratcher of this draft. I think the first 2 rounds you feel great. And look, if any rounds you want to feel good about the draft, it's the first 3. I mean, when I look at it, I just look at basically, I mean, how many times when we walked out of a Joe Douglas class, we're like, oh my God, they had a great draft. And then at the end of the day, it wasn't great. So, I mean, look, I know Gruden's entitled to his own opinions. I know he talked a lot about Aren Smith. And look, I think the big thing with Smith is you can tell this is a guy that's working hard. This is a guy that was a 1-year big hit, and I get he had big drops, and I understand that that is a huge concern. But if this coaching staff feels he can be developed, then I'm okay with that. Now, look, I just look at this, how this team fits. And look, I do think if you are looking at a quarterback, I would say this. If Cam Miller from North Dakota State is a priority free agent, I really think he's going to be a Jets. I think Morstead still the punter? I'll have to check on that. I'll have to check on that, my holy king. But look, here's the biggest takeaways. This is the first draft for an organization that's looking to redo the culture. And this whole offseason, when I've talked to Jet fans, the biggest thing is people say, look, I want this to change. I want this culture to change. I want this losing mentality to change. And to me, the guys that they are trying to bring in these drafts are hard workers, guys that don't care, guys that just want to play football, guys that are coachable, and guys that this coaching staff and the front office believe can help this team improve. And again, I know it's not the flashiest draft. I understand it's not the sexiest draft that the Jets have ever had. And I understand it probably when we get all the draft grades tomorrow, there'll be people that will pan it. And again, I think if you had to ask me, it probably was a B draft. I feel most drafts are a B. The biggest things I looked for in this draft were the following. Do they have a type? Do they have a plan? And do they execute on that plan? And it's clear that they have for this team. They know the type of players they want. They know what they want this roster to look like, and they know what they want to be. Look, the New York Jets are not going to be the most talented team next year. We know that. But you look at the guys they've brought in. They brought in size. They brought in physicality. They got guys that will hit you. They got guys that will fly over the field and hit you. Like, I will tell you this. From the offensive line to the front seven of that defense, when teams play the Jets, they're going to need ice bags afterward because they are going to be a physical team. And there's times where it might get ugly next year with this Jet team. But I'll tell you this, they're going to be a physical team that a lot of teams are not going to look forward to playing because they know it's going to hurt. Because they know they're going to lean on you offensive line for 4 quarters. Defensively, they can come at you from every level. The Jets now have options for this defense. The last few years, it was win with the front 4. Now, this defense, who's coming? Who's coming on passing downs? Do you have Quincy coming off the edge? Do you have your new middle linebacker coming up the middle? Do you have, Jamian Sherwood coming around the outside? Now you have a safety that can also blitz and come up the middle. Like, the Jets now have more blitzing options. And now as a quarterback, you know what the Jets are going to do last year. Rush 4, drop in the zone. Now you don't know what they're going to do. Now you don't know who they're going to bring. You don't know what pressures they're going to bring. That to me is exciting. And that to me is going to be very interesting. Look, when you look at Detroit's drafts weren't sexy. Sure, they drafted Jameson Williams from time to time, but they weren't sexy. They traded for Jared Goff, who at the time were like, yeah, that's not a sexy pickup. But it's worked out for them. I mean, it's because they have guys that bought in and fit their system. If the Jets found those guys in this draft, then it was worth it. But again, we will understand this once we go forward, once we see how this staff trains these guys, how this staff approaches these guys. And look, I think the Jets made the right decision. The best option for this team was to go with a young quarterback who's still 25 years old. I mean, think about this. Tyler Shaw, who was drafted, is older than Justin Fields. And I was reading the amazing stats. Like, he was backing up for Justin Herbert in college at one point. Justin Herbert's already gotten paid. Like, some of these quarterbacks come out like 24, 25, and Justin Fields has been in the NFL for a couple of years, and he's still 25 years old. I think there's still upside. The other thing, too, with the weapons discussion, and I brought it up again last night. What does this team think of the players on this team? Do they view Breece Hall as a guy that's going to carry the rock 25 times out of the backfield, or is he going to be a hybrid receiver on 7-8 snaps a game? Because he's a very good pass catcher. The other thing, too, which I kept bringing up last night, I said, we're going to learn a lot about what they feel about Malachi Corley. Because I said, if they draft two receivers, they're telling you they don't believe in Malachi Corley. Maybe they're looking at a guy that can come in and make an impact as a Deebo Samuel type, as a running kind of hybrid wide receiver, some guy that you can design play options for. That, to me, is another guy. We don't talk about Malachi Corley, but maybe he's a guy that flourishes in this new system. Maybe he's a guy that works in this new system because they trust him. They give him an opportunity. Aren Smith, too, brings a different dynamic to this team. The team did not have a straight burner that could take a top off the defense, and he can. This is someone that you look at the speed, you cannot teach that speed. And when I look at the linebacker need, it wasn't really talked about, and I understand it gets overshadowed because of the defensive tackles. But maybe this coaching staff is telling you, we like Leonard Taylor more than you think. Maybe they like Eric Watts on the inside as an edge setter than we think. Maybe there's someone out there in free agency that they like that we're not talking about. Like, there's still more of an offseason, and we don't know how they view the players on this roster. It's clear they felt that the safeties weren't good enough because they brought in Lewis Cine, and now they've brought in Brad Stevens, who could potentially play safety, and now they also drafted a kid, and they trade up for safety. So they told you one thing. They don't love the safeties. They feel that they need to upgrade the corner room. Maybe now they could use one of those corners that doesn't fit this scheme and trade them to get a guy. Maybe they're working the phones and trying to trade someone like Quincy for a defensive tackle. There's a lot of different options. And I get that there's certain teams that you look at like, oh my God, I can't believe the draft fell them. Some years it falls to you. I mean, 2022, the Jets were lucky because the Jets, the way the draft fell, Sauce Gardner fell to them at 4, and there's a good chance he wasn't going to be there. Garrett Wilson was there at 10. Drake London was taken before him. There was a good chance that, some years the board falls to you, some years it doesn't. It's what you do with it, and you make the most of it. And I think that the Jets made the most of it. Like, again, I understand they're not sexy moves, but they addressed a linebacking need, which they needed to upgrade. They upgraded the back end of their secondary today with a smart safety. They upgraded basically today. They added a piece on all 3 levels of the defense. They added an edge rusher that can kick inside in those NASCAR packages on long downs. They added a linebacker who brings size to that room that they don't have and a physicality in the run game. They added a smart safety who could be a good, strong safety and fits a skill set this team doesn't really have. And for all we know, could be a starting strong safety for this team. Because he was incredibly smart. He earned being a starting safety as a freshman in Alabama. Alabama is incredibly difficult to get on the field, let alone as a freshman. He's been out there making plays. I think the biggest one, too, again, is Aren Smith. And be honest with me in the chat. Be honest with me in the comments afterward. If we were to rewind this, and the Jets took Aren Smith in the 5th round instead of the 4th, where he was projected to go, by the way, or if they'd taken a different receiver, if they had gone with a different receiver in that draft at that point, would you be giving this a higher grade? I feel a lot of it is because of Smith. And look, I get it. part of the draft process is we give reactions. And when you see a lot of draft experts raising their eyebrows and going, I don't know, I don't get why he went there. I think as a fan base, we all kind of go, oh my God, like I don't get it either. I said this last night. I said I thought Aren Smith was going to be a member of the Jets on day 3, and it happened because they did a lot of homework on him. Now, I understand that people are also upset because it wasn't the receiver that they, quote, wanted, or that draft pundits are saying wasn't great enough. But the big thing, though, is the Jets got the guy that they wanted. I mean, Jalen Royals, I know, was probably the guy a lot of people were talking about from Utah State. But when you look at it, the Jets didn't do a lot of homework. And to be honest, most of the guys that they met with or talked to, they pretty much picked. So I understand that a lot of people are looking and going like, I can't believe they didn't pick him. Well, look at the receivers they targeted. It tells you a story. Most of the receivers they targeted, the big bodies, probably not going to be drafted. As the Bills just got Chase Lunt, the UConn tackle. Good value for them. I had Lunt as a late 3rd round pick. So Lunt from UConn probably goes and plays the right tackle position there for the Bills. But again, I'll have to check too. I'm not sure if they've been drafted. Let me actually check on the board really quick because, again, these picks now are really starting to come flying in. I just want to make sure, see what receivers are still out there. Because the Jets talked about 4 or 5 that were probably not going to get drafted, and I think they're going to add one of those. I look at like Cam Miller. I think he could get added. So let's see. Steelers went with Will Howard. So they drafted not 1 but 2 quarterbacks. So we have 2 quarterbacks in Pittsburgh and 2 quarterbacks drafted in Cleveland. What a world. Jalen Reed, a kid I like from Penn State, went, but again, Jets drafted safety. Seeing if any other receivers. Wester from Colorado went. But look, I mean, like I said, I think they're do not be surprised if one of these names, especially gets the undrafted, Will Shepard, Carl Smith, Nick Nash, I think those guys could be there, in the undrafted. And we'll go over the undrafted tomorrow, so make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of that. I mean, I was disappointed that he didn't get Elijah Roberts. Again, he went to the Patriots, which is frustrating, which makes him double frustrated. I think a lot of the frustration from this draft is we've talked a lot about certain prospects, and I think we start to focus on certain ones. We start to really narrow in on certain prospects, and we go, okay, he's probably going to be here. Okay, the Jets are interested. I feel like in general, by the time we get to the draft prospects, there's usually a good 20 to 25 names I think we've talked a lot about in the Jets draft circle. So I think when we talk about these players, we talk about them, and then they go to another team, especially in this year where you see a lot of players we've talked about have gone to the Patriots. A lot of the players we talked about wanting the Jets to take have gone to the Giants. A lot of players we've talked about potentially gone to the Bills. I think that's partly where this frustration is. It's not just that the players were picked by teams we don't like and teams we have to go against. So I think that also has played into this a little bit as well. And look, again, like I said to start the show, if you wanted the Jets to draft a quarterback and they didn't today, I think that's one of the reasons you're disappointed. If you wanted them to draft an extra receiver, tight end, or 2 receivers today, I think you walk away a little disappointed. If you wanted a defensive tackle, like I wanted as well, I think a lot of people walk away disappointed. Again, guys, super chat to jump to the front of the line. Make sure you get your comments in here as well. Let's see. Spin Max is a gimmick player. His hands are made of stone. Look, we'll see. We will get D-line, beefy guys as UDFAs. I feel like we reached a bit, but overall, I'm okay with the results. Look, the Jets reach, but people are making it sound like, oh my God, round 3, they drafted a guy that was supposed to be a 7th rounder. I remember one of the biggest reaches I remember. I can't remember the player's name exactly, but it was the Raiders back in the Al Davis days. I remember the draft was still at Radio City, and I remember they drafted a safety who ran like a 4.3 40, was like 6'3". But many people, they struggled to bring up the comps because most people has an undrafted or 7th round grade. And like that to me is a reach. To me, a reach on day 3 is someone that is a undrafted player basically going early in the draft. Now, when these guys were going to get drafted, like you looked at their thing, they were going to get drafted. Like I almost feel like maybe going forward, I'll do this in my draft review to help these kids. I almost feel like you got to do like day 1, day 2, day 3 players. I mean, I think you can divide the top 15, obviously. I think you can divide 15 through 40, kind of that late day 1, early day 2 range, day 2 range, which is rounds 2 and 3, early day 3, and then day 3. Because like day 3, there's a reason these guys are here on day 3. There are faults in their game that they're going to have. Like Aren Smith is a perfect example. He's a guy with unbelievable speed, with speed that probably could have made him a first-round player, ... But he has bad hands. Like you look at all these players today, it's either an injury issue or a character issue or a lack of production or just production but not the athleticism. And I think what the Jets did was get a nice balance of everything in there. I think that the Jets, again, it's not the sexiest draft, but I do think it is something they work on. And look, they acknowledge he has to work on the drops. They say he's willing to work. I think he's a hard worker. Malachi Moore, Glenn says he spoke to Brian Branch. The first thing out of his mouth was dog, which again, when you watch his tape, he's a dog out there. Kiko, smart, heady, aggressive, and physical player. Tyler Barron, they like his pass rush potential. Will have to be a stalwart on special teams. Muji declined to give an update on Jordan Travis, saying he doesn't discuss any player's medical history publicly. Again, the whole thing with him, Jordan Travis, is that is an injury that some of us thought it could be career ending, and it might be the case, or he might not be the same player. And look, I think the one thing, too, is I think a lot of the frustration comes that they did not take a defensive tackle. They did take a defensive lineman, but they didn't take a D tackle. And I get people freaking out, people looking at the D tackle room going, oh, my God. But look, Leonard Taylor, I thought, had flashes last year. Maybe they view him higher than we do. Again, this was a guy that last year, great example, I had a 4th-round grade on him. And if he performed the way he probably should have, he could have been arguably a top 50 player in the draft. The Jets already have him in the room. We saw flashes of it last year. Maybe they think he could be a guy. And the other thing, too, is you're able to find defensive tackles, road blocking defensive tackles in either undrafted or potentially just out there on the open market. I mean, you see cuts all the time. It's one of those positions where I feel like you can find it better than a lot of other players. And look, we still got a ways to go, but there's some defensive tackles still there. I mean, Ioannis Pebbles from Virginia Tech is still out there. Cam Horsley from BC. Like, I just look at this and I go, I do think, and again, just going through some of the picks right now, Jimmy Horton Jr. just went from Colorado to the Panthers. But look, like one guy I'd keep an eye on is Nazir Stackhouse, potentially, if he makes it to the undrafted realm. I think the Jets, too, like they want to build the foundation first. I think that their thought process is, and again, I know fans might disagree with this, was to build out the foundation, build the offensive line, build the front seven, build up the defense, and then as much as people don't want to hear it, I think that this team's goal is to compete this year and then really take the big step in 2026. And that means adding those final pieces, whether it be a quarterback or wide receiver. So, I mean, again, we will see how they attack it. But, again, use the super chat to jump to the front of the line. Did Muji use his own scouts? Or are they from – it's a mix of the JD era. So there is a mix of both. Don't forget, Savage was at the Senior Bowl, and a lot of these guys went through the Senior Bowl, so it's clear that they picked Phil Savage's brain a lot. Raymond, good to see you, Raymond. I am happy with the players we have, and we can get a D-line. I don't know about the other Jets fans. The Jets had the seven draft pick and 1 first round and 1 other stop line. Look, I don't think the Jets, especially the first 2 days, I think the Jets had an unbelievable first 2 days. I mean, round 3 is filling out your roster. Round 3 is about filling holes. And I know the biggest hole many of us thought was D tackle. But in a weird way, the Jets kind of did that and did it twice. They needed size on this defense. And instead of getting a D tackle, they added a bigger linebacker to help in the run defense. They also added a bigger edge so Will McDonald isn't out there early downs. They added an edge that's 265, 270 pounds that also can kick inside in those NASCAR packages and rush the passer. So I do think, and look, the Jets added, and thank you for bringing that up. I haven't seen the whole Muji presser. So again, if there's snippets that I've missed, please let me know. So again, please let me know if they added any other comments, basically. I mean, look, they added 2 full, I know he's someone that basically I know doesn't really turn the page. But again, they have Taylor in the room. I'm curious. They've added Nandi from Kansas City. So, I mean, they've added 3 defensive tackles. I know they're not the sexy ones, but look, they've added 3. I think the hope is that 1 works out and they have Taylor here. I don't think it's a weird room because I don't think it's necessarily barren, but I get the feeling that there's a lack of talent. I would make the case the Jets made the bigger one was edge depth, because at least with the defensive tackle room, I can see a little depth where once you get past Jermaine on the defensive edge room, it's a bit worried out there. Let's see. Aaron Glenn wants to keep his job. Jets will compete. Coach will get fired after 1 year. Look, I don't think, I think they're going to be a hard team. Yeah, Kiko, I think, is the Quincy replacement. It'll be curious to see, do they use Quincy to bring in another asset? And look, Kiko's kind of the CJ Mosley replacement. He's a similar build and size to CJ Mosley. And let's be honest, this run defense took a big nosedive with 2 players being lost. Jermaine Johnson, who is a big, heavy-set edge. They added a big, heavy-set edge today. And when they lost their big-bodied linebacker, they lost that. Look, Sherwood and Quincy are better when they can operate in space. The Jets added a guy today who takes up space, can take up the ability to take on those blockers. That actually would be a good idea for a video spin, Max. I can grade the position groups. That will be a new video. So I'll do that as a separate video, but that's a really great idea there. Hayden Connor, one of my favorites from Texas, just went picks 211 to the Cardinals again, almost at the end of the 6th round. Look, the draft's not over, Melvin. I always hate to say that. I have a weird one because, again, I think they had a really weird strategy. But to me, I think Cleveland won for a very simple reason. Now, again, I know they turned down a generational player who can play corner and wide receiver. But I think that the position players they drafted were good. But my biggest thing is the reason they won is they got a future first-round pick. They got first-round pick in a draft next year. I think that's a lot deeper to get their quarterback. I did not like how they handled the quarterback situation because if they draft the kid from Oregon back into the 3rd round, put a lot of pressure on him, make his name well known because he got drafted before Shedeur, then they come back in the 5th, trade up for Shedeur. It just doesn't make sense. Now they have 5 QBs, so I mean, you sign Kenny Pickett, or no, they traded for Kenny Pickett, then they signed Joe Flacco. So now, how do you divide those reps with 5 quarterbacks? It's like the weirdest one because outside of the way they handle the quarterbacks, I thought they had a great draft. But it's just like one of the weirdest drafts. It's like Draft Day, the movie come to life. Like there needs to be a 30 for 30 or a movie based on this draft for the Browns trading out, getting back from fifth, going back to fifth, getting a future asset, and then passing on Shedeur. I mean, man, Shedeur, that's got to be something. That's got to be a 30 for 31 days, guys. I mean, seriously, that has to be a 30 for 31 day, sliding Sanders is what we'll call it. Darren Muji, we feel really good about the players we added. I'm excited to get them here and see how they help the team. Aaron Glenn on Tyler Barron. When it comes to late round picks, it's the traits you're looking for: size, speed, and length. And then our coaches can help improve and be a good player in this league. And Barron has those traits. But on tape, he actually showed really good pass rush ability. So now it's nudging him to get him over the hump, to get him to be a really good player. And that's what we expect for him. I mean, look, he's 6'5", about 260, 265, runs about a 4.6. And that's the big thing with Aaron Glenn. And this is the thing I will really be watching with this coaching staff. This coaching staff, to me, will be under a lot of pressure for obvious reasons. But here's the biggest thing I'm looking for. Robert Saleh, I thought under his tutelage, I could see defensive players get better. I didn't say that the offense. The previous coaches especially, I did not see a significant improvement from rookie years. Even like with guys with Rex Ryan, I didn't see projection. Aaron Glenn seems like he is a teacher, and this is what he loves to do, is to improve players. And the big thing with this is going to be, can this coaching staff get the most out of these players and develop these players? And maybe these guys aren't going to be impact players day one. Maybe they're not going to be guys that become Pro Bowlers, but if they become good role players for this team for the next few seasons, that is very important. And look, I get that people are saying they're disappointed in the draft. They're disappointed. But look, it's clear that the Jets had their plan. The Jets wanted guys. They wanted guys that had, and they told you, they wanted good size, speed, and length, but more importantly, they wanted guys that had some good traits, which I think all these guys do. They wanted smart players, which these guys were. They wanted guys that would work hard, and all these guys from All Indication are really big grinding players that grind and love the game of football. They love being football players. It's not about what football brings to them, it's what they can bring to football. And the big thing is they feel that they could coach. And look, when you look at Muji and Glenn, and I know the big one, Smith, he has elite speed and adds an explosive element. When you have a piece like that on an offense, it allows you to do more. Whether you're taking the top off or you're taking shots on speed sweeps or quick smokes, he's just elite speed. Again, doesn't have to necessarily stretch the field, but could be used in the screen game. Muji acknowledged that Smith had a drop problem. It can be improved, but the elite speed is hard to pass on. The one thing is this player is very self-aware, and I think it starts there. He knows he has to get better with the drops. I've lived through this with Jameson Williams. When it came to that in the league, I like tirelessly in practice. I see Arian doing the same thing. Look, this is a guy, and he talked with Gruden too, Aren Smith. This is a kid, he's self-aware. And again, the problem would be if you had a kid that had these traits, had these abilities, and if he came to the meeting and was like, you know what? I'm a great player. I'm going to be a great player. Well, what do you need to work on? No, I'm good. I'm going to be an impact player. He probably was honest and look, guys, I was embarrassed last year. I had way too many drops. I've basically been working out with the jugs machine all off season. I'm going to work to get better as a pass catcher. I'm going to do everything I can to be a better pass catcher. And look, you can get better at catching a football. It's almost impossible to get a 4.36 speed better. It's very difficult. I'm disappointed for trading up twice for them. JD made more sense drafting. I don't necessarily agree with that. And again, Melvin, I would say overall I'd give it a B-. I think the first two were A's, but I think today, again, it's day 3 too. Thank you for your insight. Let's go Jets. And again, Spin Max with the Super Chat. Super Chat, jump to the front of the line if you want to make a donation to the channel to help making great content. Also, love the idea for a future video. I will grade the Jets depth chart as well. That's definitely a video coming very soon. So I like that idea. Beta on talent, but also depth. Let's see. Hit the like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. Doesn't one pick have serious off the field issues? I'm trying to think which one that would be. And look, Kev, I get that one too. The thing too is, like I've said, they've added 3 defensive tackles in free agency. I know they're not the sexy names, but this again to me comes down to a key thing. This draft to me tells me, and I know Jet fans don't want to hear this, that they're higher on players than maybe we are. So, for example, maybe they're higher on Malachi Corley than we thought, that they think he has a role. The other one, too, is Leonard Taylor II. I mean, last year, sack and a half, had 13 tackles. I like the flashes that he had. I think he could be an intriguing player for the Jets. Maybe the Jets look at the scheme he was in last year and say, hey, you know what? We really like him better now. We think he's actually he fits this new scheme even better than we thought. He probably is a better getting up the field and can get up there and make tackles. Maybe they think he's better in this scheme than he was in the previous scheme. I mean, we don't know how this front office is evaluating the current Jets. We don't know. The safety from Alabama, let me check on that really quickly. But look, the thing with him, though, is I do know he's been a starter since 18. Let's see. Just checking my notes. See. Yeah, I know he had like the losing his cool moments in the Vanderbilt game, he got a penalty for kicking the football. Again, I do think that's maybe a little bit more passion. But look, I still think it's a smart player. It shows that they need to get the back end for sure. And look, I get that this is, I think, a very polarizing draft for this Jet fan base. Because I feel like you either thought it was a good draft, you thought it was okay, you thought it was terrible. And some guys to keep an eye on as we look at the undrafted pool. When you look at the top 30 visits, Cam Miller is a guy to keep an eye on for the quarterback. I'd also say keep an eye on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, a running back, just so they bring in running back depth. And they also have Dean Clark as a safety they looked at as well. But look, I'm going to be curious to see what receivers they add in the undrafted pool. I would not be shocked they added a defensive tackle. We'll come on later tomorrow, probably around 4 or 5 o'clock, to give the day a little bit of breathing room, or we'll see how the day goes. But I'm definitely coming on tomorrow, so you're definitely going to want to hit the like and subscribe button, because I'm going to be coming on tomorrow. Again, Super Chat, jump to the front of the line. And if you want to get up there, and again, if you want to make sure you hit that like and subscribe, because I know you're not going to want to miss the undrafted period. Again, I love the undrafted period as well. Corley and Smith speed is crazy. I hope we can get them both the ball in space. We've revamped our entire secondary. Look, I think they did a great job with the secondary. The secondary is definitely going to be the strength of this defense. They picked players that were picked too early. CB and safety room to fill while lacking DT and edge. They addressed the edge. And look, I get not getting a defensive tackle earlier. I understand where people are coming from that they didn't get that. And look, well, they were picked too early. I mean, Aren Smith had a 5th-round grade. They picked him in the middle of the 4th round. It's not like Aren Smith was a borderline 7th rounder or a kid that was viewed as an undraftable player or a priority free agent. He was viewed as a day 3 pick. They picked him on day 3. All these guys, maybe you would have liked them better if you picked them exactly what round grade they were given, but that's not how day 3 works. We see guys go earlier than expected. We see guys go later. A lot of it's team fit. It's about scheme fit at this point. It's about filling out the roster. And I get that the Jets didn't get a defensive tackle, But I believe that they start tonight, Spin Max. But the thing is, even though they're not signing right now, they're they're on the phone. They're working the phones. They're checking in. And in some cases, players at this point in the draft probably prefer to go undrafted so they can pick the best situation for them. So they can pick a team that they feel the best chance to make a roster. So, and look, I get the trade up for the edge. It's not good players. Look, they obviously feel that there's some talent there. They obviously feel that there's something that this kid brings to the table and that they like about him, or they felt he was going to get drafted. I mean, this is also day 3 of the draft. I mean, let's be honest with day 3 of the draft. If these guys are on an NFL roster in 3 years or on the Jets roster in 3 years and having a role, they've been successful, because this is the part of the draft where the vast majority of these guys picked today don't make a roster. The vast majority of these guys get cut after 1 year. The vast majority of these guys don't make it to a second contract. The vast majority of these guys do not make it with their team 3 seasons. That's just the way the NFL works. That's just how this works. Again, maybe there'll be an undrafted player. We'll have to see. Look, Leonard Taylor last year was an undrafted player. Bryce Huff famously was an undrafted player. I mean, the Jets, they've found players that have been good players. And for people like, oh my God, they can't find a defensive tackle. There's also the waiver wire. They got John Franklin Myers off the waiver wire, and he was a great pro for them. They should never let him go. But there are ways you can still address this team. Like, when you look at the checklist coming into day 3, outside of D tackle, they needed to get defensive end depth. They needed to get wide receiver depth without question. You were curious how they felt about the safety room, and it's clear that they feel they needed to upgrade the safety room. And I was saying this a little bit too. I would have liked them to get a bigger linebacker. To be fair, a linebacker was a position I really looked at a lot this draft period, just with the needs of this team. But I think they addressed a position that, let's be honest, the Jets need a big-bodied linebacker and a thumper in a run defense. They brought that in because, as much as I love Quincy and Jamie and Sherwood, they're not run stuffers. They're not guys that are going to stop the run. They're great in space. They're great in pass pro. They're great at coming off the edge. But stopping the run's not their forte. They get a guy that's very good at stopping the run. You got the Jets today, in a backwards way, help their run defense because they got a safety that can come up and play and is physical, can get his nose to the ball and can play and is a good run stuffer. They got a linebacker that's a run stuffer. They went an untraditional way, but outside of D tackle, they improved the run at 3 stages. They got a safety that's improved their run defense. They got a linebacker that improved their run defense. They got an edge that improved their run defense. So there are different ways. And plus, we know with Wilkes, they're going to play multiple fronts. They're going to move pieces around. They're going to come from different angles. They're going to play a lot of man. They're going to blitz a lot. They got guys that can do that. Like, this is a different scheme. This is a different regime. This is a new organization that wants to bring in guys. And look, let me also point this out there too. Let me put this out there too for people that are also complaining about this Jet draft. And I understand if you're frustrated, but let's see how these players perform. One thing I can easily take away from today's draft is if people were worried that Woody Johnson was going to meddle, that I think today was proven is not the case. Because this was not a sexy draft. This is not a draft that is going to light up the papers or get the Jets headlines in the New York Post, because they didn't draft Tyler Warren or a sexy pass catcher in round 1. They drafted an offensive lineman. Yes, they made some headlines with Mason Taylor in round 2, but then they drafted a corner. Then today was a bunch of big uglies on day 3. Like, let me put this out there. If you don't think if Woody Johnson had a big say in the room, do you think Shedeur Sanders would be on the Jets right now? I mean, that could have been a possibility. I'm like, can you just imagine all that would bring? And look, with Shedeur, I mean, I feel horrible for that kid, man, because I feel like he was getting, again, I think the problem is what comes with him isn't all his fault. A lot of it's, again, having a famous parent, someone that's a head coach. I think this is one of the most unique circumstances we've ever seen. And at the end of the day, he goes to a team that not only passed on him, 6 or 7 times, but he goes to a team that drafted a quarterback ahead of him. I mean, what's that messaging say? So I just look at it and I go, okay. And look, I do think that, I do think it is a big comp to Warren as well. Look, I think the first 3 rounds, too, we forget how good the first 3 rounds are. The first 3 rounds are the most important in the draft, right? Today is about filling holes. And the Jets filled holes. Now, if the Jets today drafted another corner, or the Jets drafted a running back today, or the Jets took a quarterback potentially, or the Jets took an offensive lineman, you'd be going, wait, even though I don't think that would have been a bad thing with the depth. I think a lot of people would look at it differently and go, like, what are they doing? They don't need to do that. I mean, they filled a lot of holes on this team. They got the biggest thing last year on the defense, they lack size. What did they add today? And I know they didn't do in the D tackle position. They added a bigger safety. They added a bigger linebacker. They added a bigger edge. They added 3 bigger dudes on the defense. On the offensive side, they had a big ugly at right tackle. They had a mauler and a good pass-catching tight end. And then in round 3, they added a physical corner. Look, I think that the Jets, like every year, I think this is important. And look, I love this process. I love this draft, and I love talking about it. And look, I'll be honest. I love to be optimistic with drafts. The thing with this draft, too, is I think we're so used to the Jets kind of going shiny toy in the draft, like the sexy pick or the pick that will get clicks or the pick that, is intriguing. Look, the Jets were boring. And I know people are like, that sucks for draft content. That sucks watching the draft. Well, guess what? Boring is a good thing. The Jets were, quote, exciting the last 2 years. How'd that work out? They were boring. They just took care of business today. And I understand that when you look at these picks, are they the sexiest pick? No. Are these the picks that really move the needle? No. Are these going to be picks that will drive business? No. Are these picks that people are going to criticize? Because again, they, God forbid, they went 1 round early. They went from being a 200th round, a player in the 200s, to being a player selected in the 170s. Oh my God. Like that, like the draft, even I think Chase Lunt's a great example. I had a 3rd round grade on that tackle. He was one of my top 60 players in the entire draft. He didn't go until the 6th round as a right tackle. It's all about how teams view players, how they view them as a fit, and how the board falls. And the way it felt for the Jets is they like these players. They like players that could be role players. And look, Aaron Glenn picked guys that have a theme. Like the big thing I wanted to see from this team was, do they have a plan? And what are they looking for? And I think we've gotten our answers from this draft. Like we've gotten clarity how Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji are looking to build this team. And they want to be a team that is physical at all levels of the defense. They want to be a physically imposing offense. They want to be a smash mouth team. They want to be a physical team. They want to be a big team. They want to be a team that you cannot easily push around. They want to be a team that has versatility. They want a team that they can send anyone at any time in this defense to take your head off. You could be sending a safety on a blitz. You can be sending one of their speedy backers. You could be spending one of their middle linebacker up. They also drafted guys that, again, I think have high ceilings. They have good measurables, but here's the biggest thing you saw with the guys they drafted today on day 3. A lot of them were team captains. A lot of them played in a lot of games. A lot of them were very productive. A lot of them were very coachable. And a lot of them, when you hear about them, they're guys that when coaches talk about them, they're like good kid to coach, smart football IQ, guys that seem to be very coachable. And that's what Aaron Glenn is looking for. He wants to be a coach that can develop players, and we'll see if he can do it. That's the big question. But he sees kids that understand that they need to get better. I mean, Aren Smith knows he has a drop problem. And again, we hope he can correct it, but we are seeing that this team is investing in guys that they think are coachable and are going to buy into this plan. These are going to be guys that when they step on that field, they're going to be going 100 miles an hour every play. They're going to understand what their role is on this team, and they're going to understand what needs to be done. Like I said, the Jets are not going to be the flashiest team next year. The Jets are not going to be the sexiest team next year. But I do think they are building an attitude, and I do think that they are building an identity that they are going to be a physical team. They're going to punch you in the mouth, and every Sunday is going to be a rock fight. It's not going to be a pretty game, but it's going to be a rock fight. So you better be ready to strap that chin strap on and fight, because it's going to be a dog fight out there. And I think that's what Aaron Glenn wants this team to look like. Again, everyone, thank you so much for all this support. I know it's been a crazy draft season. All the mock drafts have led to this. And again, I love doing this. So again, we do this every single year. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our draft content next year. And of course, the undrafted free agency coming up. Don't forget, throughout this entire offseason, we'll bring you all the latest Jet news. We'll bring you some fun videos during the offseason. And of course, once we get to the regular season, we will be doing weekly videos. And of course, we go live after every single Jets game to give our thoughts during the regular season. But again, if you haven't, hit that like and subscribe button so we can use that YouTube algorithm to get more Jet fans into the channel. Make sure to send us a super chat to donate to the channel. It helps us make more content for you guys. And again, check out our community page. We always have ideas for videos. And right now we have a poll how you would grade the New York Jets draft class. So the Jets 2025 draft is in the books, but there are still a lot of pieces to add before the regular season. Stay with us throughout the offseason. We will bring that all to you. And of course, join us tomorrow as we go over the undrafted free agency period to see what other borderline Jets could be making the roster in 2025. Thank you so much for joining us here throughout the NFL draft. The weekend, though, is still not over. I look forward to seeing you guys here tomorrow. Looking forward to having you guys on the show. But until next time, I'm Nolan Rich, and this is Rich Sports Talk.